Better Man fam, we are back. The Better Man podcast going into 2025. Remember, we're still going to do 1 or 2 episodes a month where the whole crew is in-house. As always, Dee's with me. We'll have Garrett here. We'll have Manny Fresh. Those are still going to be live, fun, entertaining, and we hope encouraging. But this year, we're really focusing on that definition of manhood, the 4 W's. A real man courageously follows God's word. He loves, he protects, he serves God's woman. He excels at the work God gives him, and then he betters God's world. He does this through his children, through his church and community. So each week we're going to be bringing on experts from around the country in those 4 W's. And we're so excited today. We've got a familiar voice, a familiar face, a friend of Better Man, Mr. Adam Tarnow. Adam, how are you doing, brother?
I'm great now. It is so fun to be here. I've been all break, just been looking forward to this, going, I cannot wait to get back on this podcast. So yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, man. As you all probably know, Adam hosted the Better Man podcast for years. He tremendous host. He's so intelligent, so witty. I used to love going in studio and hanging with him. I always learned when I was with him. So good. He works at People Works, and then he has a super popular podcast, him and Clay Scroggins, with How to Lead. So Adam, again, man, so glad to have you back with us. I know it's early into 2025, but how's 2025 treating you?
Yeah. It's so far so good. It's been great. Had some fun football games to watch. The kids are at home. Yeah, it's been a great start to the year.
Come on, man. Well, today we're gonna be talking about how a better man excels at God's work. God's man excels at the work God has given him. So start us off down this path, man. Give us some insight, some wisdom around that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I love this subject. I mean, it's kind of what I do for a living now is talking about this. So, what we just said there, that God's man excels at the work that God gives him. What that takes me back to is when I graduated from college back in the late 90s, and where my mindset was going into my first job. So, I was an accounting major at school. I went to school in South Carolina at Clemson University. I was actually a 3rd-generation accountant. I know I've shared this before on some of the episodes that I've hosted, but my grandfather was an accountant. My dad was an accountant. My birthday is April 16th.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I pretty much had to be an accountant.
Tax
And
day.
so I went down to Atlanta, Georgia, and started working at a big accounting firm down there, just learning how to become an auditor. And so at that time, I'm 22, 23 years old. I'd been walking with Jesus for 2 years at that point. So I became a Christian in college. And I don't know if I could have articulated it as well as I can now, looking back on it. But my whole goal when I went to start that job was I just wanted to be a good guy, right? Like I wanted my character to be what sets me apart. And I believed that if everybody saw that I was a good guy, that there was maybe something different about me because of Jesus, that would be the one thing that would allow me to become a person of influence at that firm. And so I wanted to be a person of influence. I wanted to be somebody who could lead. I wanted to be somebody who could talk about Jesus. I wanted to talk about this newfound faith that I had. And that was the path that I thought was going to be the best way to garner influence, was by being really just focusing on the character. And it took me a couple of years and some really difficult reviews, very awkward reviews, for me to, like, annual review type things. We would do them more often than just annually, just after every job. So I'd maybe get like 5 or 6 reviews a year. Before I started to realize that although my intent was in the right place, that I wanted to go down there and be a person of influence, and certainly character is a great thing, my strategy wasn't very good. Wow. I wasn't becoming that person of influence, and it was because I was a little misguided, I think, in what was going to allow me to become that person of influence. And what I know now that I didn't know then is one of the best ways for me to excel at the work that God had given me. And the work was what they were paying me to do, which was to be a good auditor, right? And so what I know now that I didn't know then, guys, was that the path towards influence at work, it starts with competence.
Wow.
And so the number one way to lose influence is always going to be a breach of character. But the fastest way to gain influence is to excel at the work that you're being given and to be competent. And so that's the message I really want to bring today to the men that are listening is I think like doing our job well.
Yeah.
Is that is one of the ways that we honor the Lord is to be really good at your job. Now, of course, there's boundaries and things that we want to talk about where you can take that too far, where work becomes an identity and an idol and all that kind of stuff. But I maybe over the last 20 years, 25 years since I've been out of school, I've seen less people suffering from workaholism lately, especially over the last 10 years, and I did maybe in my first 10 years. I don't know if workaholics, if that's a big temptation anymore. I think where the message that a lot of people need is like, hey, actually do your job well, be competent. That's the best way to become a person of influence at your organization.
So good.
I'm just curious to know, man, what did those evaluations look like? The ones that
kind of, this is a little bit of a an exaggeration, but it was like, hey, you're great at lunch. We just need you to be good at the work you actually do. You're a great guy, right? Like you're fun to be around and you're fun to talk to and you treat the client well and you're respectful to everybody and you're super kind, And so I was like crushing. That was my goal, like just be that nice guy. Yeah. And so I treated the partners well. I treated the support staff well. I was certainly kind to the clients. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to show up on time. Like I was doing all that relational stuff just fine, but they were like, we need you to learn how to audit cash. We need you to get better at putting together financial statements. So your work is filled with all these errors. It just reminds me a little bit of like that scene from the old Seinfeld episode when Kramer just showed up at that job and the guy was giving him a review and it was it's almost like you have no business experience at all, And Kramer was like, yeah, well, I don't. And so,
it's like
it was
that.
A little bit like that.
You remember that elementary report card? Where on the left-hand side, it was competency in the subject, and on the right-hand side, you got your behavior grade.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, like Adam was dominating on the playground, right? He was out there wearing him out on the playground. Classroom, not so much.
He's holding court on the playground, but the classroom. Yeah. So Adam, I love that because so often, especially in Christian circles, we'll see this. We'll see people divorcing competency from character. Right. Trying to major over here and use that almost as a crutch or an excuse for not being good at what they do. And I think it was Greg Thornberry. He's the former president of King's College in New York. And they asked him one time, what was the impetus behind, what he was trying to do at King's College. And he said, they're a big journalism school. And he said, we want to produce journalists who are so good at what they do, whether they're at the New York Times or the Washington Post, that when they go to talk about Jesus, people are going to let them because they're so good at what they do. Right. Yeah. And I always love that thought, man.
Yeah. And it's stuff we saw on the ball field growing up. I mean, the leader of the team, like I played baseball. And so like our leader was not the guy who was striking out all the time. It was not the guy that had 15 errors in the field. It was the guy that could play baseball well. So when he spoke up to try to rally us, we all listened. So that competence is what bought him so much influence. And I was just looking this morning before we hopped on at what Paul told the church in Thessalonica in his first letter to them, chapter 4, and this is like verses 10, 11, 12, but he says, we urge you, brothers, to do this more and more. Aspire to live quietly, to mind your own affairs, and to work with your hands as we instructed you. And here's why, so that you may walk properly before outsiders. So be a person of influence and be dependent on no one, which is just great. Like, hey, make your money so you can pay for your food, pay for your house, pay for your cars, buy clothes, do your stuff. Like, don't be dependent on anybody. But the first one was there, like doing your work well, that's going to influence people. And so I'm really grateful that, after about a year, maybe even less than a year, I start getting these reviews of people going, you need to get more technically competent, that my mindset shifted and I started to focus more on the technical side. And so, fortunately I wasn't fired and was able to rebound and was able to go, okay, so as I became more of an expert in the field that I chose, then there was more opportunity to influence. I mean, even just practically, regardless, even if you don't, where you are spiritually, but just practically, that's the way you get promoted, is through technical competence. So even if you don't believe, all the Jesus stuff we're talking about, just practically speaking, if you want to get moving up, make more money, more opportunity to influence, it's all going to be, mainly it's going to be that competence piece. And so, I like that message. And again, we've got to put the qualifiers on that. It doesn't mean that your character doesn't matter. I think in what I see now, like in more on the industry side, is most people, you come in most of the time most people believe you're going to be a person of character.
That's right.
Kind of what the job interview.
Trustworthy. That's right.
We don't believe you're going to lie, cheat, and steal. You're going to play by the rules. The skepticism is not your character, usually it's your competence. And so the partners that hired me at that firm when I was 22, right out of school, they assumed I was a good guy. It was, will he be a good auditor?
Yeah.
And once I started to prove that I was grasping the technical side of audit, that's when influence started. That's when I feel like I was able to have more conversations with people. And it was a really fun season. It was a really fun season.
Adam, we're in a unique position because, as you know, we have young men that listen to the show who are probably starting careers, starting jobs, things of that nature. But then we also have pastors and leaders of men who listen to the show. So I want you to take a moment and I want you to talk to both groups individually. So talk to young men who are trying to grow in influence. What does it mean to grow in competence, and how can they do that? And then let's shift, as we get to the end of the show, let's shift towards leaders of men, and let's talk about how they can grow in influence by growing in competence. But what would you say to the guy that's saying, okay, I hear you, I've got the character, I need the competence. How do I begin to grow in that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, if you're working for a large organization, you can watch people who are ahead of you and see not just how do they act in meetings, what's their status like around the organization, but specifically, how do they work? And so watching them, I just kind of like when the music fades and you go back to your cube, like that stuff that you actually have to do, the things that show up on your to-do list, that's what I'm talking about. That's competence right there.
Yeah.
And so for some people, it's just really focusing on that to-do list. So get your job, like get your tasks done. First of all, write your tasks down. That I can't imagine. There's so
Let's
many
know what we're doing.
Young leaders, that'll come into some of the classes that I teach, and they just show up with nothing. And I'm like, you don't even have your phone out right now. Like, just write stuff down, right? So capture your tasks, get them done accurately, get them done on time. Showing up with positive energy and some optimism, as we were talking about before we hit record.
Yeah.
Little things like that will show. It's basically, can you show people, I want to be here?
Oh, that's a word.
There's a part of me that wants to be here. I'm excited about what we're doing as an organization. I'm excited about the work that we're doing. And I like, of course we all would rather, many of us would rather be on vacation, doing fun things like that. But can you project that attitude, because it's really there, of I want to be here? And what I talk to with some young leaders, what I see, if they're like, listen, I don't want to be there. I don't like any of this to-do list. Like when the music fades and I go back to my cube farm, that's when my life gets really bad. That's to me maybe another conversation, which is beyond a little bit of the scope of what we're going to probably talk about today. But I still don't know why we make 19-year-olds pick majors. I don't know about you guys at 19 year, but I was at the peak. I was at the peak of my confidence and the valley of my wisdom in life. So that did not feel like a good time to decide, what do I want to be when I grow up?
Exactly.
And so I think we have a lot of like that disillusionment that people may feel when they start some of those jobs and they realize, oh no, I don't like what I studied at school, or I don't like these tasks at all. And I don't know if we're all really good at picking jobs. And so sometimes that just those can be some clues if you don't like the to-do list, but it's just dominating that to-do list and making sure that things get done accurately, on time, with a good attitude. I think that's some of what exhibiting competence would look like.
And you're talking about, I mean, he's talking about diligence and consistency.
Yeah.
I mean, those are two things that are instrumental that to your point, Adam, seems to be missing, not just from the workforce today, but from a lot of people's lives.
Right.
Just be consistent.
Yeah.
Be diligent, right? When you take diligence and when you take effort, you mix in a little consistency, like influence, promotions, those things are inevitable at that point because you're going to be beating 95% of the people out there. I mean,
totally.
And
totally.
Those are small things, but they compound over time.
Yeah, and I think too, Adam, one of the things that you're saying is that your competence is what's going to take you to the top, but your character is what's going to keep you.
That's good.
And so
that's really well said. Really well said. Yes.
One of the questions that I have for you is,
that's good.
What do you see in this new generation, right? Because a lot of times millennials, they're getting people are giving them a hard time because they don't want to work. They get to work from home. How do you encourage those guys?
Yeah, it's I see this a lot. It's one of the topics that when I share with my clients, if we talk about generational differences, they're all leaning forward because I think everybody's just confused. First of all, just real big picture on all this, and none of this is different. I'm sure that the boomers and the builders were complaining about Xers when we showed up back in the late 90s. So this is just the same cycle of older generation kind of raining down negativity on the younger generation. It's different. It totally is different. I really have been influenced by Tim Elmore's writings on this. So Tim Elmore wrote a book, great title, A New Kind of Diversity, which was basically the fact that we've got 5 generations in the workforce, really in the first time in human history. And so there's a different type of diversity that's happening in most organizations right now, and it's just the generational diversity. And I think what the most encouraging thing for most people, and this is where when I share with my clients, some of this is some mindset stuff, but I think this is important. What Elmore notices about Gen Z is that generation has more in common with the builders, which is the boomers' parents, which Brokaw called the greatest generation. Mm-hmm. That Z has more in common with the greatest generation than they do with millennials, Xers, and boomers. Because if you just think about what they have gone through and the amount of resiliency that they've had to develop through all, terrorist attacks, wars, pandemics, all of this kind of stuff, that he is very encouraged by seeing that they've got a lot of similarities there. That was a major eye opener to look at this group as, wow, how cool that we get to help develop quite possibly the next greatest generation that's out there. And I think that mindset's really important because we've got to go in with the intent of, I want to help, not with the intent that these people are going to ruin all the hard work that I just did to build this organization or something like that. I think Gallup and those guys too see that the great global dream right now, and this is a study that came out in 2019, the great global dream for the younger generation is a good job with a living wage and a boss who cares. So here's what I would say. If you believe that millennials and Gen Z don't want to work, you're not looking at the facts.
Wow.
So that's what I would say. The facts say otherwise. And so maybe if you're struggling with motivating Gen Z, maybe it's you. Right? Because the facts are out there that this group wants to work. Now, they've got a ton of choices. They've got so many more choices than we do, which we all know that the choices can slow us down and make every decision feel. So they may be a little more stressed because they've got so many choices and they've been told by us, right, that they can be whatever they want to be when they grow up. And I think what we just said earlier is you can't, right? You got a few things that you can do. You can't just be whatever you want to be. You got to be who God made you to be. And we've all got some gifts and skills. So, but the intent piece when it comes to coaching and developing them, that goes so far. I mean, that they want to get better. They want to get better. They want to do good work. Yeah. Some of the most fun I've had over the last 2 years has been coaching some folks that are right dead smack in the middle of Gen Z. I mean, right dead smack in the middle of it. And they are hard working folks who want to do good work. Are they wise? No, Neither were we in our 20s.
That's right.
Right? Do they have all the experience? Of course not. That's why you're in their life.
Yeah.
Are they going to make impulsive decisions? You bet,
100%.
just like you did, right?
Yeah.
So just know they're just like you. They've got some more access. They're fast. They're quick thinkers. And there's a ton of hopefulness that I feel.
Dude, that's such a good word for leaders. And what Adam said there is key. He's doing the work. Like when and this is a little bit of my opinion, but when I hear older generations bagging on the younger generations, my first question is, well, when's the last time you coached or you interacted or you helped someone from that generation? And the answer is, well, I haven't.
Right.
Well, that's why you're bagging on them. You don't even really know them, right? I think sometimes people in older generations use that as an excuse to not engage.
Yep.
And that goes back to that whole multi-generational discipleship piece that we often talk about. But if you're not willing to engage, then stop talking about them, right? And I love Adam's perspective of, man, not only am I engaging, but man, these guys and gals are studs, right? Yeah. They are quicker. They do have more access to information. I mean, they can run fairly fast. And if we can be like a trellis and help that vine grow in the right direction, man, we can make some change in the world around us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I said it
for sure.
In an earlier podcast that a lot of times this older generation, when it comes to discipleship, and now that when it comes to work, they look down on them. But I've always been told, don't look down on anyone unless you're reaching down to help them up. And that's the biggest thing. And my thing, when I get an opportunity to talk to this younger generation, it is consistency is what makes you exceptional. But a lot of times what happens is they get tired and burnt out because there are so many options. Oh, let me try this today.
Yeah.
Let me try this next week. But if they remain consistency over a period of time, their skill set and their ability to kind of hang in there, will grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Adam, as the show starts to come to a close today, I just want to personally thank you. I do consider you a leadership expert, man. A lot of what you say, a lot of what you write, I digest. I often repeat it. Always encouraged by what you're putting out. So I just wanted to thank you for that. But I also want to give our listeners a chance to, you've often talked about your definition of leadership, what you think a good leader is. Man, would you share that with our listeners? It's so good, and I just want them to sit in that for a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a great definition of what it means to be a servant leader is this idea that you take initiative for the benefit of others.
Yes.
That's it. You just wake up every day and you ask yourself, you're driving into work, walking downstairs to get your coffee, thinking about your family, whatever it is, what can I do today to take initiative for the benefit of others? And so those three key words, initiative, that's what a leader is. You don't wait. You're not waiting for the cavalry to come and save you.
Right.
You're taking the step forward. The initiative is hopefully to bring benefit. You're trying to do things that are going to bring good, not bad. And it's not just all about you, it's for others. And so I think that's there. I'm trying to figure out a way to add like this mutual benefit to that. Cause some of the bad rap that I see that servant leadership gets sometimes is that it's all give and no get, which is just a recipe for disaster. There's no sustainability. And I think where I am in my thinking on this is that when you do that, when you take initiative for the benefit of others, you get back some things that are incredibly rewarding and provide a tremendous amount of fuel. So it's very, leadership is not a one-sided activity. It's it's mutually beneficial. Yeah. And so when you lead in that way, you get back a ton of energy, which allows you to keep being that servant leader that God needs you to be.
That's good, man. I think it was Ben Franklin. He said, I ask two questions every day. The first question is, when I wake up, I ask, who can I help today? And then the second question before I go to bed, I ask, who did I help today?
That's so good.
And those are two questions he said I ask myself every day. So, man, Adam, it's so good to have you on the show, man. Tell the listeners real quick where they can find you today. Like after the show, where do we find Adam at?
Yeah, you can go to AdamTarnow.com. Lots of different links there. The podcast is on all the different podcast things, how to lead. Substack, I'm out there as well. My Substack on leadership.
Yep.
So yeah, you guys have been I'm crazy encouraged by what you guys are doing and honored to be a guest. It's fun to be on the other side of the mic.
Come on, bro. It's
But you're still on the mic.
Man, Adam, it's so good to see you today. As always, you can check us out at BetterMan.com. Adam, we'll see you soon, brother. Have a great day.
Thanks, Adam.
Take care. See you guys.